Welcome to Career Tools. This is Wendy.
And this is Amanda.
Today's cast, is my company going to make layoffs? How to gather layoff intelligence, Chapter 1, Ask Your Network.
The questions this cast answers are, how do I gather internal company intelligence? Is my company going to make layoffs? And am I going to be included in layoffs?
If you want the answers to these questions and more, keep listening.
Who doesn't want to visit Miami in March? And we've got the perfect reason. Manager Tools will be there March 11th and 12th. Visit us by registering online today at manager-tools.com/register.
Career Tools started in 2008 as a result of a couple of things, but one of the timing was about the layoffs from the banking crash in 2008. So we have recurred to layoffs several times since, based on timing, when the economy is going down and there's more layoffs. And sometimes it's relevant and sometimes it isn't. But if you're listening to this guidance, I hope that layoffs is not relevant to you. But if it is, I hope that we can help. We have a podcast called Layoff Signs and What to Do About Them, which is about the sort of subtle signs that you see within companies that suggest that maybe layoffs might be coming. If your company is losing money, that's one of the almost certain signs that layoffs will be coming. And in this cast, and there's another one following, we're going to talk about how you can use your network to enroll more people in looking for those signs so that you can get a better heads up about whether or not layoffs are coming in your company, and then you can decide what to do about them.
So today we're going to talk about asking contacts within your company, asking contacts with connections to your company, and how to ask contacts outside of your company.
So the most obvious source of layoff rumors or information about other signs that layoffs are coming are the people in your own company. Those people should be somewhere most knowledgeable about customers. The people who are working with customers know whether or not customers are still buying, whether or not they're hearing rumors about customers making smaller purchases or spreading out their purchases more, which, suggests that the company will not be making as much money. The people in finance know how much is coming in and how much is going out. They know whether or not money is being reserved for things like layoffs. The people in product delivery know how the projects are going and whether or not those are going to be delivered on time, whether they're being slowed down, whether contractors are being laid off. If it's physical product, they know how much they're making in a factory and, how long those machines are running and whether or not that's been reduced. People in projects know about product status and whether or not there's timeline changes going on. So all across the company, there are people who have little pieces of knowledge which add up to things that might happen. But all of those people have sort of separate pieces of knowledge that are indicators about the health of the company. And in this, we're going to talk about how you can connect all of the dots.
Now, before we go on, let's just make it clear that we're not suggesting you start asking people you have no relationship with, have you heard about layoffs? That will give the impression that you're only making the connection to find out about layoffs ahead of others so you can be the first off the sinking ship.
And that's not a way to start a relationship or continue. No. And nor do we suggest that you directly ask, have you heard about the layoff rumors or have you heard any layoff rumors? Even if you have a strong relationship with someone, if I was to go to Amanda and say, hey, Manager Tools isn't making any money. Have you heard that we might be laid off?
Immediate panic.
Exactly, right? That's what's going to happen. The person, if they haven't heard any rumors, they're going to think there's something that they don't and that there is layoffs coming. Like, even if you were asking because you just wanted to know, like, I don't know anything, I'm trying to find out if you know something, just the fact that you're asking the question in that way will make people think that you know something that they don't and that layoffs are happening. They'll assume that you're giving them the hint that layoffs are happening and potentially that layoff is for them, and that's why you're telling them, right? They'll assume much more. They'll imbue that comment with so much more than is actually in it. So we want to be really careful about the words we use and how we have these conversations.
And if you decide to start that conversation with those words, it's entirely possible that asking in this way could actually start the layoff rumors so that you would become the source of those rumors. Rumors like that are counterproductive to productivity and the individual well-being. So let's not be the one who starts blowing the smoke that leads others to assume that there is a fire. Do not start the rumor by using a poor choice of words.
Most professionals have their head down and they're worrying about their day-to-day work, and they don't have an awareness of what's going on outside their team. Some people do have that awareness, high S's. We were talking about DISC yesterday, and some of the DISC profiles are more connected to the organization and what's going on, and those kind of have those feelings based on intuition. Other people have none. And a lot of people have enough work to do day to day that they're just trying to get through their work day to day, and they're not thinking about the bigger picture. So instead of being so direct and saying, hey, have you heard about the layoff rumors? Have a more casual conversation about the business conditions, and that will prime them to look for signs of layoffs or signs of difficulties, or even positive signs that say, hey, we're going to be all right. And when they notice those, they are more inclined to share them with you because you started the conversation that way.
And we're going to give you examples for questions that you can start these conversations off. Now, keep in mind that we're going to order them from least pointed, ones that are not so obvious about what you're asking, to the more direct approach. And we'll give you examples and explain why you should take this approach. The closer your relationship, the more obvious that you can be. But remember that the goal is understanding the business, not digging for or spreading gossip. So not starting the fire, not stoking the fire. We just want information about the business. So here's some examples of questions that you can ask. You can use a general check-in. What's keeping you busy these days? This looks for changes in the priorities or the workload that may mean broader changes are afoot.
Yeah, so someone who's project-based and in a matrix, if they're spending a lot of time on the bench, that could be an indication there's less work in the business, which means potentially the business has less income. It could also mean that that person doesn't have relevant skills or has relationship problems. That means then that they're not being put onto projects. This one piece of information doesn't tell you anything. That's why we're kind of intelligence gathering, and then we're going to put everything together at the end. And the kind of question, what's keeping you busy these days, is a very casual question that you could have with anyone who you know relatively. If you know that person and you happen to bump into them waiting for coffee or at lunchtime, or even if you are a few minutes early to a meeting that they're in. Hey, what's keeping you busy these days? If they're not in your team, that's a very casual kind of question that will work for those kind of relationships.
Another question for a general check-in could be, how's the mood in your department lately? Another generalized question that you can ask anyone that you don't necessarily have a super close relationship with, just because you're asking about the well-being of the department as a whole. And if it's an overall negative mood across the department, that can be indicative of changes or things that are not moving in a positive direction.
And again, it could be that that person has a very negative mindset and sees negatives that aren't there, and the rest of the team could tell you, we're having a fantastic time. Yeah, we missed one deadline, but it's fine. We're making it up. So again, just be careful with these nuggets of information. Don't assume or read in too much into one piece of information.
They could also be stressed out over a big project. Right. So everyone's frustrated. These are just generalized questions to start more of a conversation to get more information.
So the next chunk, or the next two, are business updates. So things like, what do you think about that announcement that we had last week? Or what do you think about that change that was announced last week? If there's changes that affect the whole of the organization, a reorganization, or a change in policy, or a change in a head of department, a VP level head of department that kind of trickles down to a lot of places, knowing what the impact was on different departments across the company can tell you maybe what's behind that or what's important in the company and what's not. It's interesting when there's changes in finance. Often that means something's happening. Could be good and it could be bad, but often it means something's happening.
And then another question could be, have you worked with our new client yet? And how's that going? This could give you information about the client and or the product health. So if you are bringing in new clients and it's going really well, that could be a good upswing. If people are slower to move or there's not as many new clients and it's not going as well, deadlines are missed or being pushed out, that could also be indicative of things are changing or something's going on.
And in tighter economies, clients tend to be more demanding because they're paying out money that they don't necessarily have. Like if that company is not doing well, they don't necessarily have a lot of money and therefore they're more careful with it. Also, they feel like if your company doesn't have the income that it wants, then they feel like, oh, we've got them. They need us and therefore we can be more demanding. Again, it's a little thing, but you can add up all of these signals. And, we want to be careful not to add up 2 and 2 and make 5. And we want to be careful not to read everything into one indication. So this is just information gathering. Like, don't make any sudden decisions. That's what I'm saying.
If you're thinking about a job change, now's the time. The job market picks up after the holiday lull, and February always sees an increase in job searches and recruitment activities. If you're worried about how to get a new job, it's time to become a Career Tools licensee. Check it out today by visiting us online at manager-tools.com/career.
Okay, next, resource indicators. So things about hiring freezes. Hiring freezes often come before layoffs. So that's the amount of human resources or even physical or financial resources that are being used, and the way they're being used can give you indicators of what's going on in a company. So you might ask a colleague who had open positions in their team, hey, are they still hiring for those open positions? Hey, did you find anyone for that team lead that you were looking for? Hey, how did those interviews go? If the answer is, oh, we stopped the hiring process or we're in a hiring freeze, that's an indication something's happening.
You can also ask, has your team's budget changed recently? Getting information about individual departments or budgets can indicate that financial change that Wendy talked about earlier, and it can give you more information about if something's different within your organization. Because as we all know, when we start cutting budgets or changing budgets to limit resources, people tend to possibly get let go because they're not in the budget anymore. Again, it's not a one indication it's going to happen because there's a lot of reasons that you could change budgets, but it could be a small piece of the puzzle if you're looking for indications.
And it's a pretty obvious question. So we've worked from something that was fairly benign, like what's keeping you busy these days, down to has your team's budget changed? That's a pretty pointed question about, hey, I've noticed changes. Have you? So you want to be careful about who you ask this question to and how good your relationship is with them. And if you have a colleague that you really trust, then you can say, hey, what are you hearing about these changes? Or even you could go as far as, are you hearing anything about layoffs? But you really want to trust that person and trust that they are not going to read something into it that you're not saying. Like, the people who are most likely to turn the wispiest wisp of smoke into a fire are the people that don't know you well. They have no scale with which to judge what you talk about. And so they'll apply their own scale. And most people are focused on self-preservation. And so it's better to assume that there's a fire and get out than it is to assume there's no fire. So you want to use these questions with people that you really trust.
Yeah. And typically people assume worst case scenarios when they don't know you, or even when they know you really well, of trying to read inside the lines or read in between the lines. We don't always take that positive intent very well. So gathering intelligence like this isn't meant to create anxiety in yourself or to spread anxiety with others. It's about gaining and maintaining situational awareness. Think of it as when you're driving, you're just checking the mirrors. for all the other cars around you. While we don't constantly worry about the other cars, but by checking your mirrors, you're staying aware of the situation around you so you can drive more safely. Knowing the state of the business enables you to make the right decisions for yourself in the face of changes.
Another advantage of starting the conversations in this sort of more casual way, in the way we suggest, is that you don't have to have information to share to start the conversation. There's no quid pro quo implied when you say, hey, what's going on with you recently? Or what's keeping you busy? That's just two colleagues discussing current business conditions.
Now, when you do have information to share, like public announcements, observable market trends, or industry news, sharing them helps build trust and build relationships. Focus on sharing factual, business-relevant information that helps your colleagues stay up to date, not spreading unverified rumors or speculation. So again, we don't want to start that fire, so make sure that you are giving information that is factual. So good professional relationships are built on mutual support and honest communication, not trading and gossip.
And to be absolutely clear, do not share that which you have promised to keep confidential. And we've talked about why confidentiality within businesses is difficult before. If you need to know more about confidentiality, why managers should not promise confidentiality and directs should not expect it from their managers, just go to manager-tools.com and put in confidentiality or confidential in the search bar, and it'll bring up the podcast where we talk about those things. But it becomes especially true when layoffs might be coming, because you could find yourself in a difficult position. You could know something about layoffs coming and you want to help other people prepare because you know that it's coming for them. But if you've made a commitment to keep that information confidential, you can't break that trust. And this is why confidentiality doesn't really work in business, because if you say to your manager, hey, I need to tell you something confidential, and then you tell them I've been embezzling money and I took
That's a good example.
$10,000 from the company and I feel really bad about it, what's the manager to do? They can't keep that confidential. They have to go report it. So that's why confidentiality is difficult. That said, if you do know about layoffs coming, then you're probably going to have to keep it confidential for some time. There's another podcast for managers called Layoffs Openly Confidential, which is about how managers can talk to directs about layoffs. So look up that one if you're in that position. But if you've made a commitment to keep information confidential, you can't break that trust. Ethical behavior means standing firm, even when breaking it might help someone else. And even if that person is your best friend, it's ethics. Like, friendship doesn't break ethics.
Yeah, not in business, right?
Yeah.
And know that once you start this intelligence gathering, you're going to need to follow up every couple of weeks. If nothing happens, you've built a relationship with the people that you're keeping in contact with. And if something does, you should have advance warning because of the information that you gathered. So it's win-win. Build a relationship, get information ahead of time.
And having listened to a lot of career tools guidance, you may think what we're recommending is our standard advice about staying in touch with and building relationships across the organization. You'd be like, yeah, haven't you said this 800 times before? And how is this different? It's not different. We have said it 800 times before, because those who are well connected previously, like before this time comes where you feel you need to know about layoffs, those people will not need to make any special effort to find out, because they will hear first. And the more you've stayed in touch across the organization and outside, because we're about to talk about contacts outside of the organization, the less connected to layoff fears that this behavior will appear. If you're listening to this and the economy is booming and there's no way that layoffs are going to happen because you've got 5,000 open recs in your organization, start making those connections now and building relationships, because when everything turns, you won't need to do anything special. You're here first anyway.
And relationships take time, so
that's true.
Get a head start.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about asking contacts within your company. Let's talk about asking contacts with connections to your company. Companies take action to curb costs externally before they take internal action. So this means your contacts at vendors may well notice warning signs before your colleagues do.
So, for example, suppliers are often aware of changes to company finances before the majority of the people in that company, at least those who don't work in finance. They notice when a company starts to slow pay them. So if a company always pays you absolutely in like 2 weeks every time for a year, and then all of a sudden it's 3 weeks and then 4 weeks, those suppliers are going to notice. If their finance contacts suddenly become hard to reach, like I've called like 3 times and that person hasn't picked up the phone, and they usually always do, and I know they're in the office, there's something going on. If there's a pattern of invoices being lost, and you're pretty sure you followed the same process for the last, year and a half, and all of a sudden somebody, the same person, is losing invoices and they aren't getting into the system to be paid. Yeah. Companies often delay paying existing commitments before taking more visible and destructive cost-cutting measures like layoffs. The company doesn't want people to know that it's in difficulty because that puts customers off. So they'll try and do it not slyly, but you take the least destructive measures first. And these are often the measures that are being taken. And those suppliers will know before anybody else.
You also need to make sure that you're paying attention to contractors and consultants that you regularly work with on projects. If a highly utilized contractor suddenly starts talking about taking a break or planning some time off, that could be a sign their contracts aren't being renewed. So they're slowing down the work. Something else might be going on. Those less drastic measures.
Yeah. Need 6 months off on a beach somewhere. But it also might mean that their contract wasn't renewed. And whilst you can have the casual how's business conversation with those contacts too, you need to be extra careful because your comments could affect business relationships between companies, even if you're not involved in negotiations, like you're far from procurement, you're not in finance, but you're talking to a supplier about when they're going to deliver something, and they say, hey, do you know so-and-so in finance? Because they haven't been paying our bills on time. Right? What you don't want to do is then say, oh, that sounds bad, because it could be complete coincidence. Again, like that whole taking one piece of information and extrapolating into something terrible is not a good thing. And we don't want to start that rumor with a supplier any more than we want to start it within the company.
Because it could be a software update that went wildly wrong, and that's how they lost everything. So again, make sure the words that you're using aren't going to start any of those fires.
Also, if you're a publicly traded company, sharing non-public information about financial health can raise insider trading concerns. And everybody thinks that I'm not big enough to matter, and that's not true when it comes to insider trading. So we don't want to help you end up in prison. Let's not do that. So just be very careful about the information that you share outside, and never share or act on information that isn't publicly available.
So let's now talk about asking contacts outside of your company. While some companies have to enact layoffs and other cost-cutting measures because of poor management, most reductions in force are connected to trends across the economy. Understanding what's happening in your industry as a whole can help you spot potential troubles ahead of your company.
And that means staying in touch across your industry with your industry network has yet another benefit, in addition to all of the ones that we've said in all of the Crucials podcasts before. It gives you another way of gathering layoff intelligence, because other companies in your industry showing signs of struggling or even starting layoffs should indicate to you to increase awareness of your own company's performance. Sure, there's individual companies that go down for no reason because they've been badly managed, because they only had one customer and that customer folded, whatever. But if there's going to be widespread layoffs, it's usually across multiple companies. It's usually across an industry, and the worst run companies will start it. So you want to be looking out for those companies and watch the dominoes sort of come towards you so that you can make choices.
And make sure you don't limit yourself to your own industry. Through 2024, the demand for software engineers was at an all-time low due to the hiring boom after the pandemic, then layoffs due to overhiring, then uncertainty due to AI. Many software engineers have had to change industries to escape the get hired, get laid off cycle, which they found themselves in. Knowing the industries, companies, and contacts are doing well is essential information for your future plans.
Yeah, let's not move from the, what do they say? Jump out the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah.
Move somewhere where you're safe. Layoffs have become the default method of right sizing as companies moved away from long-term employment commitments. So today's businesses can adjust their workforce without pension and benefit obligations that once made layoffs a last resort. If you have to pay someone's pension until, you have to pay them when they're 60 until they die, then it makes a difference whether or not you lay them off. Now that those commitments don't exist, it's easier to lay people off without additional cost. And that means that professionals entering today's workforce will almost certainly experience multiple layoffs during their careers. If you're laid off, it's just a thing. It's just the way of things. So don't feel like you've been singled out or that it's exceptional. It's now pretty normal to have had more than one layoff. And you probably can't avoid layoffs entirely, whoever you are. But you can prepare for them and you can stay aware of what's coming. And the best way to do that is leverage your network. I hope that makes those of you who are fearful about layoffs coming feel a bit better, that you can get that information and you can have concrete information to take action on rather than rumors or thoughts or feelings. Just don't be the one that starts the fire. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, everyone. That's all for this week. Join us next week. We'll take a new topic. Bye, everyone.
Bye.